everyone, welcome to this iWoman Report. I'm Cathleen Trigg-Jones. We have a country that is clearly in turmoil. The United States is now the divided states, with protests for the first time in history taking place in all 50 states. A president who, instead of attempting to restore calm, has threatened to call out the military. Cities talking about dismantling their broken police forces, and I am disturbed by all of these despicable, senseless clashes with police that we've seen all over the news since then. Since when is it okay for police to push an elderly man to the ground and just walk right over him? Those officers were fired after that video went viral, but here's another one. A female protester being beaten by police. And here you have hundreds of protesters in Philadelphia running for their lives, fighting to escape as police spray them with tear gas and shoot rubber bullets at them. Our nation has reached an all-time low. But not every protest ends in violence. Here I am in New York City marching with my own school-age daughter and her friends. It was super important for them to feel like they were part of this civil rights movement that will no doubt help change history and rewrite their future. But why are we, and I say we as in black women, black men, black mothers, black boys, why are we fighting so hard, risking our lives in the middle of a pandemic to stand for justice? I have several guests lined up to explain the very different reality that every black in America feels or has felt most of their lives. We will hear from activist and founder of the Until Freedom movement, my dear friend and my partner Tamika D. Mallory, Depelsha McGruder, founder of Moms of Black Boys, Inc., Eric Adams, who founded 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, and that little girl, the 17-year-old, who is at the center of the George Floyd murder arrests. No matter how far we've come in 400 years, the reality is that it's only been the last 55 years with the passing of the 1965 Voters' Rights Bill that blacks in this country have been even treated human enough to truly be able to exercise their right to vote. So to understand the present, we have to stop being afraid to accept the past, no matter how painful it is. You know, I heard someone this week ask about George Floyd. Someone asked, why are we trying to make George Floyd a hero? Let me just be very clear. People are protesting around the world because enough is enough. Floyd's death at the hands of police in Minneapolis follows a long history of others. The mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, who I think made the boldest move our country's probably ever seen by having the street leading to the White House painted Black Lives Matter, has had enough. The city of Minneapolis has had enough. Barack Obama, who condemned the violence but called for the protesting to continue, has had enough.
I want to speak directly to the young men and women of color in this country who have witnessed too much violence and too much death. And too often, some of that violence has come from folks who were supposed to be serving and protecting you. I want you to know that you matter. I want you to know that your lives matter, that your dreams matter. And there is a change in mindset that's taking place, a greater recognition that we can do better.
No one understands the tensions felt in our country better than my first guest, Eric Adams, who was beaten by police when he was just 15, became a cop himself, and served as a police officer for 22 years, eventually founding 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement. He's also a candidate for New York City mayor. I did want to dive right into what we're seeing, what we're all seeing play out on live television right now. In all of your years, and I've gone way back from the time that I was a reporter in New York and all of your years, did you ever imagine we would be here in this place right now?
And there's so many things happening with so many mixed emotions. And for me, it is my life work playing out right in front of me. I was arrested as a child, beat bad by police, and was told by activists to go into the police department and really fight from within. And there were days that I marched during the day for Amadou Diallo, when he was killed, as well as Amna Louima when he was sodomized. And then at night I would go and protect marches. And so I know what people are feeling at this time. And I'm excited for these young people because they are stating that they are the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the civil rights move, and they're finding their voice. And we need to really encourage them, support them, and give them what they need.
Now, Eric, let's back up a little bit. You know the police force inside and out. What went wrong here?
A couple of things. Number one, there are some police officers that are not suitable to wear the uniform. They are really some of the signals of the past. They are abusive, no real controls in place, and policing has always been a safe haven for those who have even sadistic and almost violent racist tendencies. I mean, we had an officer here in New York that threw up a white power symbol right on camera. You know, we recruit from society, and so it's really foolish of us to believe we're not going to have those same people come in the police department. Our failure to remove them immediately is what really create a lot of problems that we saw with Brother Floyd.
I just heard actually that the other officers were discharged as well.
And they should have been.
But
Yes.
you did not ask the question, why did it take so long?
You know, and that's why I'm extremely encouraged. Something happened under the Floyd case that many people who are not familiar with law enforcement will miss. Number one, the expeditious action of the police commander, the chief, as well as the mayor and the prosecutor. They immediately fired him. They immediately fired all the officers who were there and witnessed it. So it sent a strong message throughout law enforcement that you are your brother's keeper. The action of your partner or colleague, if you don't stop it, you will be held responsible. That has never happened before. That is very important.
And I would dare say that watching that, this wasn't the first time. In fact, I would say this is probably a culture that's been accepted for so long that they didn't even know they should step in and stop him.
There was a comfort that he had, even while being filmed, he's going to continue to take the life of a person. And that is embedded inside of the agencies of the police department. And let me even push the envelope and challenge even more. Every person in a career is not meant to do every job in that career.
Right.
And so there's a reason we have emergency room doctors and we have surgeons. Because not everyone, because you are qualified to be a doctor, doesn't mean you can do every aspect of it. There are officers who are qualified to fight crime. It doesn't mean they should be on the front line of these peaceful protests or even protests that escalate to the level of violence.
But is there a side of you that looks at this worldwide protesting, Paris, Africa, all over the United States? Is there a bit of a sigh of release that it's finally we're being heard?
I am extremely optimistic, but I can't help but to feel that part of the reason people are displaying this level of anger is because they're angry at the federal government. And this is not the first time a Black man could not breathe. It's not the first time a Black man was not shot in the back or had a chokehold that took his life. I think part of the reason you're seeing such an outrage is because the discomfort that people are also experiencing coming off of coronavirus, realizing the desperation of life. Now they realize what it is to be a person that's suffocating. And so there's a lot of altruism that is taking place where people are joining this march, but some of it is their personal strife in their lives. They're dealing with the crisis, and they know now what Black and brown folks are going through. Absolutely. And I think hitting in the desire to get out and march and fight for what's right for people is sort of their personal trauma that they're going through. They heard Floyd say, "I can't breathe," but you know what? A lot of them can't breathe right now. They're losing their jobs. They're uncertain about their future. They're losing health care. They realize what it is to be Black and brown. We couldn't breathe for a long time, so it's not new. Floyd is not new, and we need to be honest about that.
Absolutely. Well, Eric Adams, I can't thank you enough for all that you've done now and in the past, and please continue to fight on behalf of us. And thanks so much for taking time out for iWoman.
Thank you.
2 separate autopsies have ruled that George Floyd's death was a homicide. I'm sure most of you heard this, but reports say that George Floyd died crying out for his mother. I saw a post, in fact, online that said every mother was summoned watching that video of George Floyd's life slipping away as he called for his mom. My next guest, Depelsha McGruder, founded an organization dedicated to bringing moms of Black boys together because of incidents just like this. I know that this is something that every Black mother has in common. I don't care if you have money, if you don't have money. I don't care if you're light, if you're dark. We are scared to death when we send our little boys out into this world. I don't care if they're 6 years old. I don't care if they're 18. In fact, I'm more worried now that my son is 18.
Absolutely. And that was the whole premise for starting the organization, which I always say I didn't start on purpose. I accidentally started the organization in the summer of 2016 when there were similar back-to-back cases of Black men being killed by police. So if you remember that summer, we had Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge and Philando Castile in Minnesota, literally within 24 hours of each other. And they were both very gruesome scenes that were played repeatedly on TV. And it just, as a mom of 2 young sons who were then 4 and 7, or who are now 8 and 11, it just assaulted my psyche in a way that paralyzed me, and I couldn't get out of bed. And actually, just before we got on, I posted on Facebook, my 8-year-old this morning said something that was very sad for me, because he's looking forward to becoming a preteen and a teenager, and he's looking forward to all these milestones, such as going to the store alone for the first time, riding the subway along, for the first time. If we ever get back on the subway, I don't know. There's so many unknowns now. But before all of this happened, he was looking forward to those typical young people milestones. And this morning, out of nowhere, he said, "Mom, if I go to the store, will they accuse me of having fake money?" And we haven't even talked about the details of George Floyd case because it's so gruesome. I don't want to share those details with him.
Well, again, I joined your group. I didn't even know when it started. I just know that I remember seeing it, and I echoed your feeling. I had that exact feeling then. And that, I guess my son, who's now 18, was a freshman probably in high school. And that was at the point where we live in New York City. So it's a little different. You have to let go at some point. You have to give these boys wings and give them a little bit and then a little more and a little more. And yet, how do you sleep at night? And it doesn't stop as they get older.
Right. And that's what makes it so hard. It never goes away. Also, one thing I want to clarify is we are Moms of Black Boys United, which isn't all Black mothers. So one of the most interesting thing about this experience is that we've actually attracted quite a few non-Black mothers, and white mothers in particular, who have Black sons who are either, by birth, by marriage, by adoption, all kinds of ways, and who are really, in many cases, experiencing these kind of racial issues for the first time and seeing them for the first time in real life through their sons.
Right. Wow. I didn't even realize that, but I am biracial myself. And this is a conversation that is a tough conversation when you're talking about Black Lives Matter. But I've had many conversations with some friends of mine over, why can't we say all lives matter? Because I don't think a white mother hurts any less than a Black mother when our children are killed. I want us to protect all of our children, but I do also understand that the need right now, the emergency, is in our community.
Very so. And the only thing I regret about the slogan Black Lives Matter that I think is very powerful is that, what they're really saying is Black Lives Matter too. We already know the other lives matter. That's not a question. We don't need the Blue Lives Matter hashtag to tell us that police lives matter. We know that already. We know white lives matter. We don't just speak out about police brutality, although that's how we started. We decided to expand our mission to focus on the entire Black male experience of growing up in America and really being perceived as a target and potential aggressor and someone who may do you harm by the age of 10. That's what the psychological studies show. That's when the shift starts to occur and people stop looking at Black boys as innocent, cute little children who are worthy of, love and adoration, and start looking at them as someone who may do them harm. And just think about what that's like if you're a Black boy and suddenly one day people in your class, in your community, are looking at you differently. Like, how do you navigate life like that when all you're trying to do is be? and pursue your hopes and dreams and aspirations as, just like everyone else.
What do you see as the future, and what can people do right now to make a difference and get involved?
Well, one thing I want to encourage you to follow Mob United. So if you go to our website, mobunited.org, there you can sign up to be a member if you're a Mom of Black Boy or subscriber, and you will see all of our calls to action, all of our webinars. So one thing I did mention, there's a whole other side of this. It's about community and preserving our wellness. So we just had a whole month-long series of mental health conversation, because I always say we need fuel for the fight. So we also have to invest in our own mental health and wellness. But we are, actively speaking out about Ahmaud Arbery, about George Floyd, about NYPD inequities in policing, and all of our updates on what we're doing next will be there. So we're actually, now that the officers have been arrested, we're talking about our strategy and next steps, and we'll be releasing things regularly. So that's one thing. I would say if an ally, support organizations who are doing the work, like join in and raise your voices, speak out against injustice whenever you see it, and then help fund organizations who are doing the work. You can donate by going to our site as well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. My best to your little boys.
Likewise.
We need you. So I really appreciate you being a voice and being that shoulder for mothers. Keep doing what you're doing.
And we need you too. And thank you. And I admire you so much. And I hope that when the world resumes, we can get together in person.
None of this would be taking place. In fact, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if it weren't for 17-year-old Darnella Frazier. Darnella just happened to be walking around her neighborhood when she came upon that officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck. She took that now infamous video that has changed the world, set off worldwide protests, and called for social change.
Oh my God. I posted a video last night and it just went viral. And everybody asked me how I feel. I don't know how to feel. Because it's so sad, bro. This man was literally right here, 8:00 p.m. yesterday. I'm walking my cousin to the store, and I just see him on the ground. I'm like, what is going on? I pull my camera out. This man cannot breathe at all. He's like, please, I can't breathe, and they did not care. They killed this man. And I was right there. I was like 5 feet away.
Darnella's attorney, Seth Coben, spoke with me earlier this week. She said she's struggling emotionally and psychologically, not only because of all of this new attention, but the reality that her single action has set off a chain reaction that has literally changed history. Some are even comparing her to Rosa Parks. I wanted to start by asking you, how is your client doing, first of all? I know this must be a really, really difficult time for her and for everyone.
My client is traumatized. She's shaken. She's been through more than your average 17-year-old ever should have to go through. She's witnessed things nobody should ever have to see. The aftermath has been very stressful. All the attention is hard on her. But in spite of all that, I think she's doing remarkably well. She's upbeat. She's staying positive. She has good days and bad days, as you might expect, but I think she's doing much better than I would be doing in that situation.
Darnella Frazier, basically, right now is being credited with probably launching the biggest civil rights movement since the 1960s. That's a really heavy lift. Because of her, these arrests were made and may not have been made without her and her courage.
That is absolutely correct. I regard her as the Rosa Parks of her generation, somebody who just happened to be in that place and time, and who had the presence of mind, the internal strength, and the courage to do the right thing.
Can you just explain what actually happened? How did she just happen to be in the right place at the right time?
She lives in the neighborhood. Her family lives right around the corner. She was watching her 9-year-old cousin, and her cousin wanted something from the store, so she took her down to the store. As they were approaching the neighborhood shop, she saw this commotion. She saw police officers apparently extracting someone from a vehicle, an African-American man. It looked really rough, and she said, "What's going on here?" When she saw him down on the ground, she pulled out her camera. She just felt that if she didn't record this, no one would believe it.
How is she doing right now? I would imagine this has taken a toll on her.
Oh, it certainly has. I mean, this is just your regular 17-year-old high school student living the life of a all-American teenager. And now she's thrust into the spotlight. She witnesses a terrible crime. it's certainly something that haunts her. She's a very strong woman. She's remarkably mature. She shows tremendous presence of mind. I think in the long run, she's going to do fine. There'll probably be good days and bad days, but I think in the long run, she'll do great. This woman's a real hero. She has a tremendous amount of support. She's got a great support network. The community has really rallied behind her.
Do you think she really understands the magnitude of what she's done by recording this video?
I don't think initially she understood it. I think as this situation has gone beyond just that street corner, beyond just Minneapolis, beyond Minnesota, beyond the United States, I think she understands that this is really big. In my experience, I've never seen police officers fired this quickly. I've never seen a police officer charged with murder like that. Usually it's like a year at least. It's a long drawn out process.
What is next? I know the officers have finally been arrested. We have protesting everywhere right now, not just in our country, but in the world. This by far is one of the biggest stories of all time, and in the middle of a pandemic. What's next for her?
Well, she's just finishing up her school year. This is her last week of school. She's doing the distance learning because of the pandemic. She can't go to the classroom. I think that's where she is right now. She's not going to be involved in the case very much for a while, at least. When it eventually goes to trial, she very well may be called as a witness to testify. They will be introducing her video as evidence. So she'll probably be asked to testify as to the contents and what she was doing at the time. I think for now, they're probably done interviewing her. I think they've gotten all the evidence they want from her.
Well, Seth, thank you so much for taking time out. I really appreciate it. I really hope that we can talk to her. I would love to just be able to say thank you. Thanks for all the people that stood up for on that particular day. Without even knowing it, you've potentially changed history.
So where do we go from here, and how long will it take? This protesting that we're seeing all over the world right now is not new. Blacks have been protesting since the days of Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "A riot is the language of the unheard."
I think the answer about how long it will take will depend on the federal government, on the city halls of our various cities, and on white America to a large extent. This is where we are at this point, and I think white America will determine how long it will be and which way we go in the future.
A half a century later, and the conversation around race is still an uncomfortable one. And it's not just black men that we're talking about here. Black women are also being targeted.
Breonna Taylor! Breonna Taylor!
Charges were eventually brought against the officers that stormed in the middle of the night, unannounced, executing a search warrant at the home of Breonna Taylor. They shot her 8 times before realizing that she was not even the person that they were looking for. Again, the question that angers so many people around the world is, why did it take so long and thousands upon thousands of protesters to finally reopen the investigation that never should have been closed in the first place? And sprinkled in between all of these violent police killings are the many false claims that blacks have had to endure for many years. The pregnant socialite on New York's Upper West Side who called the cops on a black woman who was in her neighborhood minding her business, falsely claiming that the woman was chasing or attacking children. Much like Amy Cooper did a few weeks ago in Central Park, calling cops on Christian Cooper, claiming that he was threatening her and her dog. In both of these incidents, luckily, there was a video to support the cases of both African Americans. And my final guest is Tamika D. Mallory, a modern-day freedom fighter. Recognized on Time's 100 list, Tamika is one of the organizers of the Women's March, and she's also the founder of Until Freedom, the movement which has largely been responsible for the many protests that we've witnessed over this past couple of weeks. 8 cities in 8 days.
American government, institutions, and those.
Mallory, right? And I know you're not rested. You're anything but rested right now. Let's start. Let's go to the beginning, because we've been seeing you on the front lines right now protesting. And what I know about you is that you're passionate. This isn't a new thing for you. This is something that you've been living since you were a little girl.
I come from a family of activists. My father runs the sports team at Reverend Al Sharpton's organization, the National Action Network. And my mom is a regular participant. They've been funders for the movement, and maybe not at the $1 million level, but at a sustaining level for many, many years. So they are deeply connected, deeply rooted in the movement. I couldn't figure out why my parents wanted me to be around old people wearing dashikis and African clothes and bones in their ears, when I wanted to, I was thinking the movie Paid in Full was the life that I wanted to live. And when I turned 13, I became a runaway. So I started running away from home and I put my parents through about 4 years of real live hell. And then I got pregnant with my son, who's now 21 years old. And 2 years into his life, his father was shot and killed. When he died, I had an opportunity to sit with how these systems of oppression literally caused his death. I was able to connect the dots.
How do you feel seeing the images, seeing everything that's going on in our streets, and the fact that the whole world now is protesting?
I think the entire world is traumatized. Even people who could care less about Black people still don't need to experience death in the way in which we see it. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd was just too much, especially coming right after two things. COVID-19, people have family members and friends checking out, 100,000 plus Americans dying, no leadership. You expect someone with authority to come and speak to you every day from that podium. But then the first thing you begin to see is, in the name of social distancing, Black people being beaten in New York and the white people receiving the respect and support of the police officers. Even with the Orthodox Jewish community, the way in which the police approached dealing with their social distancing violations was good police work. When they approached, they didn't use F words and throw people around. Then we found out that Breonna Taylor was shot in her home 8 times by police who were there in custody.
Tamika, is this a white or Black issue, or is this a race issue?
I think it's still a Black issue. Always will be, because we're at the center of it. Mm-hmm. But my son says something that I think is so true. It has become a white issue because we can't dismantle, as Black people, a system that we didn't create. White people have to start the work. The work is going to the white people need to do better movement in your kitchen on Thanksgiving and Christmas. It starts at home.
It starts at home. Real quick, before you go, because I know you have a crazy, crazy day, let's just talk about the fact that charges are finally brought against all the George Floyd case, but it's still only second-degree murder.
It's not enough. I feel like the book should be thrown at them. And it's very similar to how Black people are treated. There's hardly any due process. This is about systemic racism and how white supremacy reigns in the institutions of this country, from the White House to the corporations to the schools, single nook and cranny. White supremacy is a dominant factor. Yep. We can go all the way to court and all of that and still not get a conviction for a videotape where we saw in front of our eyes a murder. But what we now know is that our protest movements, our boycotting, all of those things work.
I do want to touch on the elections real quick. Joe Biden has said he's going to pick a female running mate. Should this be a Black female? And do we have a chance of winning?
I think with 94% of Black women voting for Hillary Clinton, if you want to ensure that you're successful, not just in an election, but in everything you do, Black women are the way to go.
Tamika, I love you. Thank you so much. Keep going, doing what you're doing.
Thank you so
much.
much.
We're here for you.
You can see my full interview with all of today's guests on our iWomanTV YouTube channel, and also Tamika's podcast, Street Politicians, with her partner, My Son, the General, which I executive produce. You can catch the second season, which is going to be launching this week right here on iWomanTV. And that brings me to my final thought of the day. Frederick Douglass once said, "It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Frederick was an American social reformer, an abolitionist, a statesman, and a former slave, and he was a wise man. The future of our country lies with our youth and the generations to come. While we've made some progress, racism is still very much a reality. Sometimes it's based on the fear of the unknown or fear of someone who's different from us, whether it's the color of their skin or their beliefs. If we start teaching children, white and black, that racism by any other name is still racism and it's wrong, perhaps they can be the ones to pass that on to their children, their friends, their parents, and future generations. As Martin Luther King pointed out, no other race in America started here as slaves. So there is a long history and hundreds of years of beliefs that have been handed down generation after generation that need to be dismantled and reprogrammed. And unfortunately, the worst form of racism is the racist views that people don't even realize they have, because you can't change something that you don't see as a problem. So while I fully appreciate seeing so much of the whites that are joining in these protests around the world, and I also really appreciate all of my own white friends and family who've called and texted to let me know that they stand with us, what I would love to see more is action. Show us how many qualified blacks you've hired or you put in key positions. How many contracts are you awarding to qualified black companies and vendors? How many black teachers, administrators, CEOs, police chiefs do you have on staff or do you plan to hire? Because that's how change in culture and the climate of America is going to start. It starts at the top. How many of the decision makers look like the people who are protesting, the prisoners who are in jail, the people who are being killed because of the color of their skin? Change will only come when the decision makers and their children truly believe that Black lives matter as much as any other life in America. Thank you so much for joining us for this iWoman report.